You're watching Vulnerable Venues, the effort to preserve Philly stages, a community conversation presented by WHYY.
Which provides up to $15 billion to music and entertainment venues, passed in late December. Have any of you received some of this COVID relief? And if so, how have you applied it to your businesses?
Well, I'll jump in and say that none of us have received it, unfortunately, not a dime. It does seem like it's on the way, and there's, there's a lot of optimism about the program at this point. Kerri knows better than anybody that it's been a challenge for NEVA and for our community to sort of work hand in hand, not only to get awareness built to the point where the SVO passed, but then spend the last few months trying to get the SBA to roll it out in a way that really impacts the right places and the right venues like World Cafe and Ardmore Music Hall and a lot of the places that you guys have mentioned already. So certainly once it comes in, I don't think any of us will have any trouble finding eligible expenses to spend it on, because we've all had overhead and rent and debt and payroll, and we're trying to, restart and bring in inventory. And there's a lot that it's going to be really, really impactful for. So we're all just fingers crossed at this point on the timeline.
Could not agree more with what Chris is saying. It was a very long road to get the Save Our Stages Act passed, which ended up in the legislation at the end of December that was in the COVID relief bill. It's now called the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, and it ended up at $15 billion for not only independent venues and promoters, but actually also museums and independent movie theaters. And it was very exciting. We felt very proud of the incredibly hard work that went in to get it to that point, but it has been a bit of a stressful start to the year waiting so long for the application portal to open. But as Chris mentioned, we are finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are expecting that application portal to open soon, very soon. And NEVA has been working pretty much around the clock to support the SBA in this process. They've never done anything like this. And this was really a Main Street bill. This was, the largest arts, federal arts money that had been put aside for small businesses in this way. And it was brand new to everyone. And so it was really a learning curve, but NEVA has been working around the clock to make sure that the venues and the promoters and the arts institutions that are so vital to the ecosystem are really the ones who end up with these funds. And so we are confident that after this time and the diligence that's been put into the process, that's what's going to happen. But it's been a long road. And as Chris mentioned, it really wasn't, this was a lifeline. We have a whole year and counting now where most of us are functioning at over 90% revenue loss. So this is really about digging out and starting to rebuild so that we can have a little breathing room to hopefully start thinking about reopening.
Can you just give our audience a quick insight into how these funds will be distributed once it's able, and then also what has been the holdup thus far? Is it simply a capacity issue?
Absolutely. That's a great question. It's 100% a capacity issue. Like I mentioned before, the SBA has not done anything like this before. And so the lift to do it and to do it right. And again, they've really done it with a lot of really deliberate intention to make sure that the application was formed in a way that would support all of the small businesses, including the independent venues and promoters that it was intended for. And so we really feel like they have done that now, and they've gotten to a place that all of those businesses who it was intended for will be able to receive those funds. And there is eligibility requirements around how you can access the funds, and what it's based on once you meet the eligibility requirements is 45% of your 2019 gross earned revenue. So just like when the PPP first came out as relief, what our industry realized very quickly is that kind of federal relief was really not going to help an industry like ours, where we were the first to close and we're going to be the last to open, and we had no one to pay for that payroll protection. And that's really where Save Our Stages, which is now the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, was formed from, to say we need funds to help keep our pilot lights lit, and we need those funds to be eligible to pay for things well beyond payroll, because unfortunately, as everyone here has had to experience, we had to furlough almost our entire staff overnight, and they have remained so to this point. So there are eligibility requirements. There is a cap on it as well, because this really was intended for these small venues, the small promoters who are often overlooked in these types of grants.
And Fatina, Aja, I'd like to direct a question to you. What has been your source of inspiration during the pandemic?
Kept us motivated was really just the will to get back to being creative. Number one, when the pandemic started, I had just secured a space to start rehearsing, basically what was the plan, to go rehearsing to go on tour. And that it was like, we can't rehearse, we can't get together, we're definitely not going on tour. So it was like we had to figure out what we were going to do with that space instead of rehearse with all of the guys, because we couldn't hook up together anymore. So we just started to hone in on the content that we had already created and how we would be able to start to present some of that stuff in a virtual space in a curated form that was more specific and direct. And, of course, we had to get in tune with the virtual concerts and things of that nature, just thinking about how we were going to continue to connect with our audience. We've all been trying to figure that out as venue owners, as artists, as, anybody creative. That's what you have to do right now. And so we've just been trying to stay focused on how we were going to deliver the next things. And we were in the midst of making an album, in the midst of trying to keep a show going that we had been producing for 4 years that we had to stop doing. So we had a lot to keep us motivated in some senses, but, there was a lot to, overcome.
I think we would be remiss not to mention that the motivation of survival.
Oh yeah, always good motivation.
There's a motivation that's really behind that when you think you're going to be off work for a month and you end up off work for a year.
Mm-hmm.
So if you asked any of us, did we think we could go without working for a year, we would probably look at you like you were crazy. So the fact that we did end up doing a record, and amongst other projects throughout this time,
a lot of other projects,
is nothing short of a miracle, really. And the grace of God, but certainly it is tied into the ingenuity and the creativity of artists themselves, and just kind of getting back to that original hustle. And we all live in Philly, so we know about that.
This is Philadelphia.
And Chris Perella, you can touch on this. You've done so much, as far as the live streaming goes. Do you think that this is going to change, the model you use? Because adding these expenses has to be, how are you thinking on that? Like, as far as a business mindset of, okay, we want to give the production value, we want to be able to get the biggest reach, but now how do we execute this in a business mind?
Well, so it's been sort of a year-long grand experiment for us and for everybody who's gotten into the streaming world. And I think for the last few months, it's been a lifeline of sorts. And I certainly, nobody can survive with that. My hope is that it becomes a nice add-on to the core experiences, which are the community live experiences. And I think that's what, we all as venue operators and promoters thrive on. It's also, I think, what fans and artists obviously thrive on in just being able to engage each other with that in the moment energy. And you can't replace that with a live stream. So if there's an opportunity to carry forward with a path that allows artists and venue to make some ancillary revenue from streaming to supplement that, then that's great, because we're all living with margins that are too small to begin with. And now coming off a pandemic, I think we all need to be creative on ways to supplement what we did before and push the envelope and innovate. But certainly if streaming's anything more than a little bucket to add into the rest of what you do, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So are you saying it's not going to be a mandate? You would like it to see as maybe an add-on package you don't want to lean on it.
Correct. Yeah, I think that there can be great benefits for certain shows and for certain artists, but it is going to be oversaturated at a certain point. And I think the only reason we've been able to have some success with the model we've created at Ardmore Music Hall is that we're casting a really wide net with free streams to a gigantic audience, all of whom are trapped at home. And the minute that changes, I think far more than the majority of people are going to go back to doing what they do, which is being social creatures and connecting in community spaces and third places away from home and work that I think motivate and drive and inspire all of us on this Zoom. So I think it needs to be an add-on at most and not a lifeline.
But one thing about the live stream concerts, me and AJ, we've done 4 live streams since the pandemic started. One we did on IG Live when it felt like we had to. And, then the other 3 we produced. And we're about to do one next week for the album release concert called The Backyard Barbecue, a virtual concert. But we've already taped it, and then it comes on. And to me, I feel like all of the live streams work better for us when we tape them and we produce it and then we stream it, rather than trying to stream it live. Not that we don't think that we can do a great performance, but that's a whole nother production level, you know what I mean, that is required, that again, we're not really supposed to all be together doing all of these different things, all of these different components that we're trying to add just to present, just to stay sustainable, not to make any money for the most part, just so it looks like we still doing what it is that we did.
Will you want or require people to be vaccinated when they come to shows again, immediately following the lifts and everyone no longer being on lockdown? Or are you a little bit loose on that? What's your messaging to your audience as you start to plan for life outside and on the other end of COVID?
I think the venues, what I'm hoping is that we continue to be very safe in terms of I feel like the mask wearing is going to have to extend for quite some time. And particularly if we are going to be in venues together, no one can really guarantee that anyone is going to be quote unquote vaccinated. And what I certainly do not want to do is create an environment of surveillance and violating people's medical privacy, which I think is not a road that I want to go down, as much as I might want people to make that choice, because we're hoping that is what will happen. I don't want the creative scene to then become the guinea pig for making those kinds of health requirements for people. But what I do hope is that we can continue to press and push as many safety measures as possible, so that the artists and the fans feel safe. Because I think that's really ultimately what people want. They want to make sure that they're not in danger of getting ill, and nobody wants that. So, and I certainly don't want it on my watch. We have canceled shows that hired us to come in before the vaccine was even out, and we said no, and we turned that work down for that very reason. I can't guarantee my fans will be safe, and I certainly don't want anyone to get sick on my watch.
And we're going to take a break essentially right here, but I wanted to get Jim in on this right before we go to this break. Jim, will you be asking people that they be vaccinated in the future after lockdown?
No, me and my partner Vince, we currently book Broken Goblet Brewery. It's up in Ben Salem. It's right outside Philadelphia. It's a 400-seat venue and brewery, and we're booking shows there now. And just like Chris and Kerri, the owners there are very, very adamant of safety. So right now, the way their venue's set up, they have enough room to spread out the people, and they have a large outside facility, which they are working on a pavilion right now. So for us, we're booking artists right now, which is a great thing. It's a great thing for the artists we work with. But all the safety precautions are in there, and we don't want to, as like everybody else has said, we don't want to, invade on people's own personal issues or their own themselves. But when the venues and takes the above and beyond what's needed for somebody to be safe, that's when we will book shows, and that's where we started to book at Broken Goblet currently.
Greetings. My name is Saj Purple Queen Blackwell, owner and chief executive officer at PQRadio1.com, the first internet radio station in the city of Philadelphia to be owned by a Black woman. Here at PQRadio1.com, we give unsigned, signed artists, entrepreneurs, community, and leaders a worldwide platform to lift their voices and to promote their talents. What's unique about PQRadio1.com is that we are housed by a historic venue, the Community Education Center. It was built back in the 20th century, but now is an artist incubator in the city of Philadelphia. We have cultivated a support system for artists. However, we have been tragically hit like everyone else in the pandemic. So, how can you help? Donations. We ask you to visit us at cecarts.org and donate. Or come on down and visit us at 3500 Lancaster Avenue, Philadelphia, PA. We want you to join the class, rent some space, or come visit our gem, the Meeting House Theater. Saj, Purple Queen Blackwell, PQRadio1.com, WHYY, nice. You know how we do.
What's up, everybody? My name's Justin, better known by my stage name, Expo. I'm a music producer, audio engineer, and partner here at Watts Studio, located at Warehouse on Watts. Also co-founder of WHYY-TV. We started WHYY-TV here at the venue last year in the middle of the pandemic. COVID hit us all pretty hard, especially venues and musicians and artists. So we wanted to create a safe space for some of the city's best DJs, musicians, artists, visual artists, and comedians to create content and engage their audience. And we do that through live streaming. So it's like we have our own little pirate TV station here. And, you know, we go live every Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you can catch us on www.wowphilly.tv or on the Twitch channel directly. It's twitch.tv/wowphilly_TV. And also, we've been able to successfully, not consistently, but successfully get talent paid and sustain the venue and to pay our crew that runs the streams. So we can, we've done that through sponsorships and we've done some fundraisers. The sponsors have gone a long way. Any help, you can help us by, we're looking for more sponsors to be able to keep the shows going, to support the channel and support the arts and let the creators create. Some of these DJ shows are going to turn into events once things open back up. We're very much looking forward to that and seeing all your beautiful faces again. Until then, you can catch us on WHYY-TV. Thanks, guys.
Speaking of venue owners, last year, particularly after the death of George Floyd, the entire country began talking more about diversity, inclusion, and equity. How has your community, your industry grappled with this conversation, considering that most music and entertainment venues in Philly aren't necessarily owned and operated by people of color?
Oh, great. No, I'm so glad you bring it up because, one of the things that has been apparent for a long time, but should have been apparent for a lot longer, is that we have a huge equity problem. There's a huge access problem to capital and to resources and to the ability to start your own venue, especially in Philadelphia. There are huge roadblocks, and it's an absolute issue that has to be addressed because you're not wrong at all. When you look around the landscape of ownership and management in almost all of the small independent venues and honestly all the venues in the city, it is not a diverse situation at all. And you really start to look at why, the breakdown of that access to capital and those access to opportunities is absolutely at the heart of it. And so I want to give a shout out to Councilmember Thomas, Arts and Culture Task Force, especially the co-chairs, Raheem Manning and Sierra Lambert, who have really taken this issue on to say, how can Philadelphia course correct? Because as a community and as an industry, this is absolutely something that we need to be looking at. And our venue in particular is looking at One of the ways that we've been so thankful to do is a lot of what we were able to sustain through this pandemic was our educational programming. And what we've really done is look to expanding that to go beyond music creation, which we all love and support and feel strongly about, but also getting into the music industry dynamics, explaining and breaking down the walls to understand there are so many careers in music that go beyond being on the stage. And how can we create a situation where when we engage with students and when we engage with young people, that they understand that there are pathways to these type of careers that could be available to them if we take the time to spend developing them. So personally at World Cafe Live, we've spent a lot of time figuring out how our reopening can look to enhance that. And so a lot of times what you see is somebody hires their friend who hires their friend who hires their friend, and all of a sudden you look around and everybody looks the same, and it shrinks down your pool so small that so many talented people are just getting overlooked, and it has to stop. And it's something that has to be addressed. And it's something that I'm proud to say that NEVA is also focusing on, because we've all been so siloed in our independent houses, just grinding it out, that nobody really ever stopped to take time to look around to realize how much better we could be doing things, because we're all, as Chris mentioned, the hamster wheel of just putting on shows, doing our thing. And if there can be a silver lining and a saving grace to this pandemic, is that we all had to stop. We all started talking to each other and talking about how many things have to change and how many things we could be doing better. And it's exciting to see what's developed from a lot of those conversations. And I think we're going to see a lot of that happen. And I think really here in Philadelphia, what we have to focus on is it can't be challenging to, form a creative space. There cannot be all of these roadblocks. We cannot continue to give all of the funding to the same 10 organizations. There has to be a breakdown there, and and access has to be at the heart of it.
Fatin and Asia, I'd like to bring you into this part of the conversation. How or has the lack of Black ownership of venues in the city impacted you, your music, and your community?
So it's a couple of things, right? So, one of the things that impacts us heavily is trends that we've seen in the past where particularly with Black artists that are labeled, within the R&B soul genre, and I can kind of mostly speak to that. So let me just say that. So that's just only one part of, in terms of Black artistry, because, we're DJs, we do all kinds of stuff. So I'll speak to that. But in that one trend we have seen is maybe we see artists get work at a particular group of venues or a venue that's owned, like several different locations of one particular venue. And we oftentimes get excited about that, but unfortunately, we don't know how sustainable that is over time. And so what we've seen is that over time, slowly but surely, they begin to book Black artists less and less and less once it's been established as a group of venues, or even one in particular. So even like many of the places that we played 10 years ago, you no longer see Black artists featured in those places as much as you used to. And so for us, it's hard to know exactly why that is, because we're just trying to stay afloat. So we keep it moving. So that's one way that it has affected us in particular. But I think it's also affected us as artists, and we get older, and you put out your albums and you're very popular at one point. And then as you get older, you're consistent with your audience, but then you want to branch out and do other things. And so that's where I think Kerri was saying earlier about the roadblocks. That's when you begin to experience the roadblocks, because once you're not the talent and then you're trying to get into ownership and you're trying to get into promoting and some of those other spaces, then you run up against a lot of the financial hurdles, you run up against the access hurdles. And those are the types of things that, the ways that we've been affected in fact, that we've been promoters. We've done a live performance show for, like I said, for 4 years. and bounced around and been to two different venues doing so. So we've seen it at the artist level, but then we've also seen it at a very systemic level in terms of access and ways that we want to get in, but we've not been welcome. So there's that part.
I want to here real fast and say, you know, shout out to the Bynum brothers, shout out to the Club of Jazz, the two leading African-American venues in the city. Yeah. Shout out to even Kevin Parker, who just passed away with his Miss Tootsie's, even though it's not necessarily a music venue. It was also a venue that we as African-Americans would frequent and love and respect. Yeah. And we have played at almost every venue in this city, unfortunately, except for the Ardmore. But you know what I mean? And no disrespect there, but like we've worked with almost every African-American promoter in the city as well. And we know every person who's somebody who's doing something here, yeah, thankfully. And I would just say that it really does hurt that there are not more African-American led venues and spaces and places for so much African-American soul music that is representative.
We're Philadelphia.
Up here in Philadelphia. And what Adria was saying too, you know, and you know, this isn't to attack anybody, you know, but World Cafe Live, the Tower, TLA, all of these different places have been, they have utilized the talents of African-American artists at different places, at different points, at different times to build up that audience in that place. And then for whatever reason, sometimes even City Winery, then it seems like less people or African-Americans are playing in the venue at different times. And we don't understand it. It's just like that is not enough mixture. And it could be that there's not enough people going to see the people. It could be a myriad of people. Maybe the bookers don't know who to book, whatever the case may be. But this is a town that has got to have that diversity in order for us all to thrive and continue to thrive when and if these venues do open up, because there's so much great music that is not really being explored, is not being tapped into, and that are not enough people, in my opinion, are getting the kinds of opportunities that they need. That is what we do as artists to try to facilitate other opportunities for artists too within that space, because we want to make sure that they are included as well as we are included.
I mean, when we did our show, we brought more Black artists into the city of Philadelphia in 4 years and have been here in years. The first artist that we had on our show was Rasan Patterson. He hadn't been to Philadelphia, booked in Philadelphia for 8 years. And so that's a tragedy, you know, and so we have to think about it in terms of why would it, if the issue is not just about placing Black people in positions like bookers and managers, but also placing the right-minded people in those spaces, that they understand who needs to come, how the city's function, how its art scene functions, and what the community looks like, who people really want to see, who they haven't seen, and how we enjoy ourselves and how we want to enjoy ourselves.
We got enough gentrified communities. We don't need gentrified venues too. You know, that's my feeling. You know what I mean? Again, I don't say it with disrespect. I don't say it with the wrong intention, because I love all kinds of music. I love all contributors of music, and I love all venues because they're giving musicians an opportunity to do what they do. And we need that. But it does need to be a fair across the board, in the same way that society is dealing with those things. We as a music community deal with those things. So we got to step it up.
I know from my end of booking, I try to be as most diverse as possible when it comes to booking artists. I've done that since day one. I think it needs to start at a lower level at the venues that are under 200 in Philly. Because what happens in Philly is, it's what Kerri was saying, is you have, oh, my friend, I'm going to hire my friend and this friend. Then it winds up being kind of cliquey. And I hate to use that word, but I really think that venue owners and people like myself and other promoters in the city, we have to mentor the younger generation on what this industry is, and like, you know, mentor young kids that want to get in the industry, want to be a promoter and bookers and stuff like that, and you know, teach them the business the right way, instead of like having just like, you know, let's put my friend's band on or running the clubs how they are. Because I mean, I know how it is. I mean, I've tried to do hip hop shows before in venues like, no, we don't want that here. not even hearing the music first. You don't even know what I'm doing. You know, you don't even, I've been booking for years. You should really trust my judgment on what kind of shows I want to bring. I want to do R&B shows. If I want to do, you know, any kind of show, you'd be surprised at a lot of venues that back down to us on the smaller level. So I think you have to tack at a small point and then move up in the city to like the Cindy wineries and stuff. Because sometimes you just get booking agents that are used to booking a certain amount of certain people when they come around, and that's what they do. They'll just keep on doing that, and they just don't really try to develop their venue, if you know, or the scene. It's like, okay, the next venue, let's fill it up, pack it, let's make the money for the day, let's move on to the next point. You know, next day, and we'll do the same thing. Whereas I've always done, when I had the Grape Street Pub and everything else, everything was about developing the artist. I didn't care who you were. If you had talent, the whole idea was to develop you so that you could be, you know, to enhance the Philadelphia music scene. And I think that's across the board in the city. I think a lot of venues don't do that. It turned into, you know, on the smaller end where, you know, it's all about how many people you can bring. It's my friend's band, or this is what the scene is, and that's it. And they don't try to develop, you know, artists. And that's where I think that there's a lot of room that we need to do there is, you know, mentor up and coming artists and mentor also a lot of promoters. And those promoters hopefully will become venue owners eventually.
I really hope that when and if everything does open back up, that all of the Philadelphia venues will make space and place for up and coming artists. It is the thing that allow our community to thrive and to grow, is having a space and a place to develop, hone our crafts. Unfortunately, it feels like every place that we all started in, it just got destroyed or disappears from the city. So it would be nice if we could have some landmarks and some milestone places in the city that are going to stay, and that they'll be here for the next generation as well. And we could look back on and say, that place made such and such. Yeah. And now that's going to make you. You know what I mean? And whether it's reopening the Uptown or fixing the tower right and making the Ardmore another place that everybody goes, and World Cafe Live and don't go nowhere. You know what I memean? Just like, that's what we need. We need to be cultivating the next tomorrows. So just what he talked about, the bookers, the promoters, and, you know, reaching out to them, those people as well. But the music scene thrives from the musician. And it is too many great musicians here who don't have an opportunity and a place and an outlet, when this should be like Tennessee. This should be like Nashville. This is a music city. We should hear Kenny Gamble and Philly International music as we walk down the street.
It's all riled up, yeah.
This is what y'all supposed to say, amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
I really think there needs to be a huge Philadelphia outdoor music festival, and not the big ones that we know about on 4th of July that are all big artists. We need to give us the Parkway. Let us get the sponsors, and let's put like this big festival together and have
come from
all
unity.
the group, you know, and have unit, have every style, music style. I want to see jazz, because I'm a huge jazz head. I'm pretty sure everybody else is. And that's another lost form in Philadelphia. You know, we have all these, and there's tons of young kids that I see that are killing jazz right now in Philly. You know, they're playing Time, they're playing Chris's Jazz. I book a bunch of them, but, you know, these kids need to be heard, you know?
I want to talk about, as a musician, as someone who has a jam session that travels to different venues and performs and has to deal with a lot of local and independent artists. I either play for them or I mentor them. One thing we know, and I think everybody here can specifically relate to, is the relationship between artist and venue, especially on the local scene. And as we're talking about so many things that are like, how do we work together? A lot of people may say the truth of the matter, it's artist versus venue. Who's trying to get the best deal? You know, why do you want my 5-piece band to get $200 for 4 hours of playing? How can we survive? Is there something fundamentally wrong with the business model that, one, artists cannot properly be compensated without a venue being at risk, or that within 2 weeks in the venue, you know, like if you tell me, hey, my venue after a month or two, we're going to be at risk of going under, I wouldn't expect you to have the proper funds to pay artists. So it's almost, I think these things go hand in hand. Is it that, or is there money we're not known about? Why do artists, you know, let's talk about the artists and the venue. What's going on here? This is for anybody. And then also follow up, does this mean we need to approach or look in while we have this downtime to reimagine the business model completely?
Well, I mean, am I going to jump in on that? Or?
Go ahead, take it. Start us off.
I like what you said, because it does, from an artist perspective, always feel like it's artists against the venue. And that's an unfortunate scenario. And I don't know if that ever really changes, but during the pandemic, what I have started to understand a little bit more is that it almost feels like artists, we're more like waiters. Yep. And we got to figure out how we get the $2.13 an hour, how we can get those tips. So we got to super serve our audience a little bit more, and we got to add additional components to what it is that we do so that we actually get some money, the same way that venues do that, because they don't just sell your tickets, they sell drinks and food. Yeah. And, coat check or whatever other things that go alongside to supplement the income of what they can't make from you just playing in their venue. But you don't usually have that. You know what I mean? And if you're an up and coming artist, then it doesn't really matter that you have merch and music too, because people don't really know you well enough to want to purchase all of those things, which is the reason why you're only getting $200 for 5 people. So it's like, until you've built that kind of framework up and that kind of audience up, then you can't really benefit from all of the other accoutrement that you would add to what you do. So, it's always about that Philly hustle, or any hustle in general as an artist, that you have to make the very best deal for yourself that you possibly can. And just like the venue does too, you do work together in the sense of y'all are all in the music industry, but they have an agenda and you have an agenda. And that is just the reality of it. They need to keep their doors open, and you need to keep food in your belly and keep your roof over your head. So we all have kind of a job to do, and we're not working against each other, but we are in some ways in competition with one another to get the maximum that we possibly can get, because the venue owner has bills just like you got bills.
Kerri, if I can, just tag you next. Same question.
Sure. No, absolutely. Dan, you asked such an important question. Asia, you made such brilliant points. And I think, the idea of starting this conversation and keeping it going, I'm really hoping that this panel really does just start a bunch of conversations as opposed to be just one final conversation. But I think really, Dan, you asked a really important question. And also shout out to the Arts and Culture Task Force again, because that squad has been doing a whole lot of work for free as volunteers. And I think it's going to have a whole lot of impact. So please check out what they're doing if you haven't already. But NEVA did a survey of its members right at the height of the pandemic when NEVA formed. And all of them, 90% of them came back and said they could not survive 6 months of being closed. They would, we've seen that play out, right? And I think what you speak to here is a real core of the issue, that our margins are so razor thin. So it's like, what's going on and what can we do? And I really think what it comes down to, for me, organizationally, World Cafe Live transitioned to a nonprofit in 2019. We had an in-residence nonprofit that focused on our educational programming. And when we kept talking about prioritizing people, it honestly became the only option, right? And that's great for us, and it works for us, and we have a mission that we were developing, but it shouldn't have to be what everyone has to do. You shouldn't have to be a nonprofit. And I think one of the things that NEVA really exposed is that when we're talking about the creative economy, we're after the same things. The for-profits and the nonprofits are both in this federal legislation, because when you get to a certain level and above, then it's a big difference. But down here with the small guys, who we really all are, there really is no difference. So why are we only putting huge dollars and huge support behind big nonprofits? So I think, for us, it's like, great, we're able to say, we want to prioritize artist payment. We want to prioritize our people. We want to prioritize our mission and our education. That's great. But someone who owns a for-profit venue shouldn't feel like that's not an option to them. And I think changing that culture of recognizing that commercial music is also a public good, right? Yeah. So that's what we really need to shift the dynamic around, that says you shouldn't have to be out here only grinding because you're not playing in an orchestra, right? Commercial music is a public good. And we have to, as a city, particularly here in Philadelphia, because Fatin, you're right, we are a music city. We don't talk about it enough. We don't celebrate it enough. We don't support it enough. For any of you that watched the budget play out last year, you saw exactly how Philadelphia felt about its arts and culture community. And, you know, that has to change. That has to change. We have to recognize that what we're doing here generates not only money and a huge tax base and huge tourism dollars and all of this, but also creates the character and the fabric of our city. That's why people want to live here. That's why people want to work here. That's why people want to visit here. And we cannot let that disappear, but you have to support it, and you have to support it in more ways than one.
Yeah, a lot of great thoughts just shared, and I think the bottom line comes down to the fact that neither side is able to make through relatively successful events the kind of money or margin that they should be making through successful events, and that a lot of other industries are able to make. And I think I don't have a good answer for why that is or how to fix it necessarily, but I feel pretty strongly that a lot of that tension comes from a place where both sides are legitimately undervalued for the kind of work and effort that is being put in. And so a lot of times an artist who perceives that their deal sucks is getting that deal from a venue that, despite their absolute best intentions and efforts, is just not making enough money to offer the kinds of deals that artists deserve. I think as a promoter in the city, I think any of us are pretty aware of the fact that, you know, at this point in 2021, a 5-piece band shouldn't be getting a $200 opening slot. On the other hand, we can barely make, you know, enough in ticket sales to cover the headliner, the opener, and the marketing expense, let alone start to chip away at our rent and our insurance and our, you know, just the list goes on. It's no different than being a musician. And you see all these memes pop up of musicians saying, you know, I just tallied all the gigs I lost in 2021 and I saved $300. And it's sad, but it's true in a lot of ways. And you know, I know you're exactly right, Dan, that the business model is fundamentally flawed. I definitely don't know one simple answer to fix that, but I think everybody here has touched on some really good ideas for how to start. And I agree with Kerri that the nature of the sort of advocacy fire being lit, it should carry forward from this. And when we get past the point of survival, as Asia was alluding to, then we can start working on how to build on the experiences and the learnings from the last 12 months. And part of that is banding together as independents. There was a company that's unfortunately defunct already, but their mission was to take the Live Nation and AEG model of pitching sponsors on 20 or 30 venues around the country. And by getting all of this massive collection of data and different demographics in different cities around the country, you can pitch that to major brands because you're doing that kind of scale and that kind of volume. There's no reason why 30 independent venues in 30 towns around the country can't do the same thing. And I think those are the sorts of connections and partnerships and opportunities that we all have to force ourselves to pursue more coming out of this, so that those margins aren't as thin and everybody can get what they deserve, because, you know, no one on the artist or venue side deserves to work as hard as we do and barely get by. So there's got to be some collaborative work done to start to fix that.
I want to shoot this question over to Jim. I believe you touched on it earlier in the discussion. Could you go in a little bit more depth about the importance of 200-person cap spaces?
The 200 cap and below, that's your bread and foundation of the Philadelphia music scene. You know, everybody wants to play the big rooms, but you have to start somewhere. So the key is to find artists that are hungry, that have the Philly hustle, that have great music coming out and very dedicated. And people like that I work with all the time, and you just try to help them and mentor them to be a better artist and how to get bigger in the scene. Like how can I grow my crowd? Put them in front of the right other supporting artists to help them grow bigger, and so on. And you create this chain. If you keep on doing that on a regular basis on under 200 venue, eventually you're going to have a point where I can do a full show at World Cafe Live of all local acts, and it sells out, and it's because it was all developed homegrown. I've seen them at Ardmore. There's shows that they've done, and I've seen it in World Cafe Live. There's been a lot of shows built on artists that were, you know, started at a certain level and built themselves up to that point in the scene. And what I'm gonna do is go back to like, it's also up to the venue, and the venues have to be 100% behind it. I've been around for a long time, and I've been on a lot of bad ends more than I've been on good. And the development is very important. And a lot of times you get venues that don't care. You know, it's just like they're more like the guys that I'll say the wrong people own venues. Sometimes wrong people own venues, and that's why they don't last long. And that doesn't give you the opportunity to do that, is develop artists. You can't just have one venue in the city develop artists. You need all the small venues to be on kind of the same page, or the majority of them, so that everything grows at one point.
Asia and Fatin, if you could answer this, and as all of you are giving your final remarks, if you could also include this, just quickly also add what venue, past or present, has had the greatest impact on your career as part of your closing remarks. Asia and Fatin, if you could just answer that quickly, and then as we move on, as you offer your closing remarks to everyone else, if you can also throw that in there.
I want to go first because I feel like, I was born in Philly. You born from DC.
Did he know? Did he know?
Oh boy, I'm jumping in on that. No, but I mean, I think I think we probably have the same answer, but like, it's impossible not to give the 5 spot that love for us, because Old City is where we got our thing started, is where everything was cultivated, is where so much of the energy that we love and that we are a part of course, was born. And now it's not there anymore. And so the 5 spot and the Black Lily was really the pivotal instrumental springboards to everything that came from Kindred. But, again, like we said, we've played almost every one of these venues. So they are all special. They are all significant. They are all milestones in our tapestry, I suppose. So we're just grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah,
including the Uptown Theater.
Yeah, this city has been our story. The venues of this city have been our full story, even our actual personal stories, and we'll tell that another time. But it is a big.
We even started Kindred Presents at World Cafe Live, Kerri.
Now we kissed, I think, for the first time at the Khyber.
Oh well, the Khyber is not on here.
Thank you so much.
And I've been to the Ardmore many times. And the Grape Street Pub and the Blockley and all those places. Put money in all your pockets.
Kerri, can you jump in on this? What's a significant venue for you?
Ooh, that's fine. I was not expecting to answer that. I mean, honestly, I couldn't not answer World Cafe Live, only because it's been a long time. I was hired on the sidewalk in 2004 when it was still under construction as a server. And I grew up in the venue, literally. So it's meant a lot to me to stick with it and watch what has changed in the city, watch all of the artists that have come through, watch all of my incredible colleagues and staff that have come through, and to recognize the power of the platform that a venue can have when it's done right. And not to say that we've always done it right, but there's power in it. There's power in that community. There is power. This year has been a lot of tears, a lot of fears, but I think at the end of the day, music is what we all kept turning to, right? We all kept turning to it through this whole time. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, there's a lot of things that we took for granted, and there's a lot of things that we told ourselves could never be different. And we were wrong. We were wrong about all of it. And so I'm so grateful, I'm grateful for this panel and everyone on it. I'm grateful for all these connections, because Philadelphia is special, and Philadelphia has so much history and so much going on. And not only does it have an incredible history, there's an incredible future. There is music being made right now. There's so much musical energy just in this Zoom right here that I just, and I can't wait. And that energy is electric, and it's uniquely ours. And everybody needs to go get Kindred the Family Soul's new record. Download it. But honestly, like, there's so much energy, and we have something here that is uniquely ours. And we need to be proud of it, and we need to foster it, and we need to preserve it. And we need to make sure that that is all of our first priorities. And I think if we can do that, it's not a small thing, but I think this is our moment. This is our moment to really claim it and do it and keep conversations like this going. I'm so grateful to Dan and HYY and Amir, everyone for thinking that this was important and making it a priority, because the more conversations like this that we have, the more we can really understand that, there's something here. And if we're able to continue it and foster it, like, it will be here forever.
The venue, I'm going to say the Grape Street Pub, because I spent 15 years there, and all 15 years was great. But there was one show that we did that kind of changed my whole aspect. It was being a fanboy, and also is when we booked in that small venue, which is 125. We had Grandmaster Kaz, Busy Bee, Cool Herc, and that whole original, hip hop. The Godfathers of hip hop. Melly Mel came that night. It was one of those nights that I was like, oh my God, we're doing this, like the birth of hip hop. People that built this thing is playing this small venue in Manayunk for 125 people. And they did it because they loved doing what they did. And I kind of changed my mentality from meeting them guys and talking with them guys, but also, being idols of like being a part when hip hop first started and being like drawn to that. But to be able to do that, it kind of changed the way I looked at how I booked from that point on, because it's like that whole thing, anything's possible. And after that point, I hit that point in booking is like, okay, now we can do anything we want. It doesn't matter where it is. We can grow from this. And from that point on, I know we went to a whole different levels of like what we did and who the artists, and we were at that time, we were so diverse. I mean, we had rock bands downstairs, we had DJs upstairs, we had a whole different vibe. And it was just so cool to see that and see that everything can coexist in one space at one time. And that's kind of special in my heart. And I kind of use that going forward.
I'll have to say the Blockley on this answer, because it also ties into a lot of the things that are being talked about in terms of fostering community, in terms of if nothing else, sort of introducing me to Black culture in a lot of ways, because I grew up in the suburbs of Delaware and everybody in school was white and I didn't have any Black friends growing up. And, and being able to bring in such an eclectic range of genres at the Blockley, but also connecting with, some of the real influencers in town, like Tony Allen, Walking Bear. And then we did a series called Pirate Radio with Rafiq and Lewis that was basically meant to bring back the Black Lily and 5-spot vibe. And we did that for quite a while, and it introduced me to a lot of the most amazing soul and R&B and hip hop talent in the city. And we really were able to foster that sort of community developmental vibe there that we've all been talking a lot about. And it became a spot that people would go to find new music and new talent, not just a place where I would plug in a tour that I thought was going to be successful and then move on to the next show. There really was a culture that we were able to build there. And I think that has carried forward for me in a lot of ways, just in terms of some amazing relationships. And I just met with Tony a couple of days ago to talk about some ideas for later this year, and just to kind of touch base in general. And so it was not only the venue where I and a lot of the guys and gals that I still work with cut our teeth and just came to understand the music industry and the Philadelphia scene specifically, but also the place where I, was sort of educated by a lot of people who have been in Philly a long time and who have had connections to these really special institutions that have fostered creativity and that have fostered artistry in ways that, was inspiring as somebody who came into this as a music fan, not as a business person. And I've had to learn the business as I go. But certainly I think all of us come from a place of wanting to genuinely support music that we love. And being able to do that in a way that also taps into the core of the Philadelphia, heartbeat, it was a real thrill. And I've been able to continue that on some levels, but I also look forward to the challenge and opportunity of trying to do more of that, particularly downtown in the years to come with some of the other clubs that we work with. And I agree with you guys and with Jim that there's not enough of those smaller venues in it for the right reasons, who are open-minded and willing to bring in not just music that we know and like, but bring in people who know the music that we don't know, and trust their judgment, trust their taste, trust their ability to curate and teach us a thing or two about what's out there, because there's an awful lot of artists out there, and you can't possibly know them all. So I think one of my strengths that I pride myself on has always been listening to people who know more than I do. And certainly I had the advantage of a lot of that experience at the Blockley, and that has positioned me to really just prioritize and care about some of those things in whatever projects I come across.
The Blockley was so instrumental. I'll definitely say that was a significant venue for me as well. And while we're on it, Flood and Dan, I'd love to hear what venue in Philadelphia has played a pivotal and significant role for you.
I'm gonna say Warm Daddies. I've spent so much time traveling and playing other venues, and grateful for that. But looking at it when I was coming up, it was the easiest place for me to play. Like it was looked at. I'm not gonna say lower tier, but I'll be like, I was proud. I was like, yo, man, and then I got around some people and they're like, oh, you at Warm Dad? And I'm like, what? But I love it because it did provide, as we talked about today, it provided the platform. I remember just walking past, and it wasn't no low tier. Like I walked in and Adam Blackstone was at the bar and he was like, yo, what's up, Dan? And I was like, what? Like it wasn't just, most people think, oh, the sound, anybody could go there. And as far as a Black, musician, I got to play for myself. I got to play for my mom and aunt. I got to play for, it was all around, every aspect of me, because either somebody I knew, myself. And so I appreciate those moments because it cultivated me, growing up in church, right? Playing a musician, we played on the worst equipment, or you spoke to another church. Yeah. And they're like, oh, don't bring nothing. We got equipment, right? And we got drums, or and I used to try to play drums like Chris Flood, but, and you show up and it's like 2 sticks in a pot. And so Warm Daddies, in a sense, sometimes was the equivalent of those, that gauntlet of, well, we're going to make it work here, but making it work at Warm Daddies made me appreciate. And I'm like, when I went on my first tour, I'm like, I get all this, and I'm like, okay, I could hear myself. Oh, I could, but that stuff is,
you hear yourself?
Yeah. And it was just
that's terrible. What you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is wrong, Dan.
I'm just saying.
What is wrong now, Dan?
No, he's right.
What you're doing is wrong, Dan.
He's right is right.
Oh, Dan,
it really served me. It really served me, and it served me in my career and my growth and my development. And to speak to what we were talking about, it's a venue that did and still does, even in its new location. And again, like Fatin said, shout out to the Bynum Brothers. It served the community. So that's really it for me.
I would have to say there's 3 venues, and I will do it in 60 seconds, that are the most important to my life. Was the Uptown Theater, was where I kissed my first girl and played the drums for the first time. The Clef Club of Jazz, shout out to Lovett Hines, who's been a lifelong friend, who allowed me to come in every Saturday and sit with him and Sam Reed and John Blake and Alfie Pilot and just sit under those guys and look at Fatin doing the thing. And believe it or not, I would say the 5 spot, because I was to be a part of such a rich legacy there, of knowing what happened there. And like I told Dan, my band, we played the night it burnt down. So we were the last people to play there. My band was the last people to play. I remember we played, I packed my drums out there at 3 a.m. and got a call at 8 that it hadn't set on fire. And I was just like, cigarette. So those have been the 3: Uptown Theater, Clef Club Jazz, and the 5 spot.
I can't say thank you enough to everyone for offering your time, your energy, your thoughts, your experiences. This has been an incredibly rich conversation. We're going to be looking back at this, trying to figure out, really how to handle this. This has been incredible. Thank you so much. Once again, my name is Amir Richardson, aka the Bul Bey. Thank you so much. I really just want to say thank you to Dan. Dan, you are legitimately the MVP. Thank you for giving your time, energy, and insight to all of this. I just want to applaud you from home. Thank you guys, and thank you everyone for joining this conversation, and be sure to check out WHYY for follow-ups on this conversation and other thoughts as well.